Ladies and gentlemen, the boys are all back in town. And that's somewhat of a literal statement considering this podcast's tendencies for all of us to be traveling in some way, shape, or form at various times of the year. To say the very least, welcome to your favorite NFL podcast. That's been sweeping the nation for a good while now. We are so glad if you have decided to join us back once again. It is the Sports Agents of Chaos. Joining me here at the top of the screen, the master of games here on the program. He's the man, the myth. Some would say he might be a legend. The Games Master, Justin. Justin, how are we doing?
I'm good. I'm not the Games Master today, though. That's all you.
Sure, we'll get to that in a moment. We have trivia at home with Justin at home in this one, so we'll see if my little brain game I have for the guys get the juices flowing. And I will say it's very much related to what the theme of the episode is today for a good bit. And joining us at the bottom of the screen, of course, soon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very confident in saying this. Put out the good energy here for the boys. I believe, Justin, we're very soon to calling this man Dr. Podfather. The Podfather, how are we doing?
I'll show you how I'm doing. This is what I currently feel like right now. Like this little frog in this little old snow globe. That doesn't actually work. Rainforest Cafe, by the way, very sad that they closed the one in Jersey, so something left us in Disney. So now I guess I have to take the dog to Disney if I want to go back to the Rainforest Cafe. So the wife wins. Yay. Yeah. That's all I really learned.
Well, the Podfather, of course, brimming with energy, of course, because he's the Iron Man of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, as he has proven time and time again, truthfully. So I always appreciate you. Always appreciate it when the three of us can be here. And the three of us are here, ladies and gentlemen. Perfect timing, because it's mock draft season. It's time to talk about the draft, this, that, and the third. And we are going to be talking about the draft today, but not this year's draft necessarily. That is for a soon-to-be, very soon, mock draft, the special three-round mock here of the SAOC. But no, it is time for our traditional 1 year ago draft look back. The three of us are going to look back at last year's draft and have a little bit of fun with our selections of various categories that we have. And of course, because it's three of us, we do everything in threes. We'll have three names for each of you. There might be repeats. It wouldn't surprise me, but that's what we'll be doing. But before we get to that, we do have the trivia at home. And it is time for the trivia at home. So for my money's worth, and mental capacity lower than what was I say? I took that off specifically just because I was ready to see what sub-headline Rick had there. Anyways, this, my boys, I have a little bit of a fact or fiction for us. At least I have decided to label it a fact or fiction. The Games Master, maybe when he sees this, it's like, I don't know, maybe I would have made a different game, but I have this as a fact or fiction, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, boys, as we know, the NFL draft is very much upon us, and unlike me, who for whatever brain injury I have suffered for the last several years thinking the draft happens in May, it does not. It's April, and it's very soon, within a couple of weeks. So to look at that, I have a fact or fiction, boys, that I think is very interesting. And I feel like this is the kind of question you could ask this question either way, but this is sometimes the kind of question that you ask with maybe there's a little bit of looking at this draft, maybe there's a little bit of looking at the future drafts. In fact, I definitely think the Podfather and I talked about the idea or semblance of this, maybe preluding to parts of last week's episode of the discussions we were having. So, boys, I want to read you the teams with the first 5 picks of this year's 2025 NFL draft. Of course, at first overall, we have the Tennessee Titans. At second overall, we have the Cleveland Browns. At third overall, the New York Football Giants. At fourth overall, the New England Patriots. At fifth overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Duval. So, I've read you 5 teams, boys. And my fact or fiction. Do we think at least 2 of the top 5 teams could potentially trade down in this year's draft? And because here's why I'm saying this, like just the general concept of why I'm going with this. We all probably believe the Tennessee Titans are going to stay lock and step. They're going to pick a quarterback with the first overall selection. We don't know who, but I'm sure we believe they're going to pick quarterback at first overall. Second overall is the Cleveland Browns. Now, technically speaking, do they have a quarterback? Some would say it's debatable. But we know it would be a very interesting decision for this team to try to make, to have a quarterback under such a big contract, to draft one so high up may not necessarily be the thing that they do. So if you're Cleveland, you look at other spots, could you maybe augment the roster? The rest of the draft, with the Giants at third, of course the Giants do need a quarterback, but do they look at whichever quarterback isn't taken first overall and think, maybe, just maybe, is our franchise guy really here? The Patriots believe they have found their franchise quarterback in Drake May a year ago. So maybe this is a thing where, because it's a new coach, you're still trying to plug away at a team that is detoxifying, well, not toxic necessarily, but getting rid of the last remnants of the previous regime. Could this be a time where you maybe trade down to accumulate more picks to add to other spots in the roster this year and next? And the 5th overall pick, Jacksonville Jaguars. Whatever we may think about him, I know he regressed this past year, and I think the three of us would agree he does need to show up big next season. Trevor Lawrence he's paid. He's already been locked into a big contract. So the expectation is really just one high-end player going to make a difference in this year's draft? Or do you maybe trade down, maybe get a couple more mid-round picks if there are maybe some guys the scouting department has found and they like? So it could be a myriad of reasons. Maybe the ones that I've said completely mean nothing. But boys, I'll throw it to either of you who wants to take this first. Do you think potentially two of the top 5 teams could trade down in this upcoming draft?
I'll go first. I think, obviously it's going to depend on what they offer, but I don't necessarily think that there's going to be teams willing to trade up. And that's what creates the issue here. Because if you're trading up, you're giving up a ton of assets. I mean, what have we seen for teams to move up into the top 5? 2 first-round picks, 3 first-round picks for the number 1 pick. Like, I think it's very clear Tennessee takes the quarterback. They're not trading out. They're keeping that pick. Abdul Carter is probably going in the first 5, as is Travis Hunter, being an elite athlete. And then who else do you want to trade for? I mean, if you're a believer in Shador, maybe, but are guys going to give up top talent and top assets to move up and get these guys? And I just don't necessarily know if this is that kind of draft. Now, I could see a lot more movement in the 7 to 10 range, but very specifically, I don't see more than one, if there is one, team moving out of the top 5.
See, what's fun about this is that in our mock draft, I have the Titans as the number 1 pick, and I'm going to go on record, because we talked about it a little bit last week, that I don't really believe in these top 2 quarterbacks. So I think you could see a team jump, but I think the question really is who's going to be that team that jumps up. Usually when it comes to a top 5 pick, you're looking at like a 6 or a 7 or someone in that range. But maybe a team does, want a Shador that badly. And if they want a Shador Sanders that badly, then they will jump up. And that's going to create the interesting run, because to Justin's point and the Jerk's point, the Patriots and Jags are kind of set at quarterback. They don't need anything. But when we see runs start in this draft, some team's going to get very trigger happy and want to jump up to get Jackson Dart before anybody else does. So I could see it. I don't know the team, but I could see it. I think the Giants would be the best candidate to trade down at this point, because after the moves they made, they don't need a quarterback right now, and the offensive line picks that are there are good, but they're not top 5 worthy, or they're not top 3 worthy, I should say. So you can probably move down and get, a Membu or a Campbell, in like the mid 10, mid 5, 6, 7 range. And New England and Jacksonville kind of do the same things. So I see them moving down. I think what's really interesting to me would be watching what Dallas does in 12. Because I think Dallas has the potential to move up from one of 2 things: Shador or Ashton Genty. I think since he's kind of mocked like middle of that top 10 to the 10 to 15 range, if they get a vibe that there's a team above them that wants to jump in and take him, I mean, and I'm looking at the teams that are picking, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think a backfield that has Alvin Kamara and Ashton Genty and is very terrifying in the NFC South. And the Saints could be a team that could possibly go. So I can see the Cowboys jumping up and doing that as well. Patriots, no, they're set. So I feel like Dallas could jump some people and want to get up there and make a splash. So I could see it. I mean, I think the Giants are the right candidate to trade down. And again, you have to reconcile with that fact, like you said last episode. Reconcile with the fact that trading down is the best option for you right now. And then we'll see if that floodgate opens up for somebody else, because I'm sure it will.
Yeah, and while it may not necessarily happen between the Giants and the Cowboys, and probably ultimately because the Giants have such a high pick and they may not want to let the Cowboys get a player too talented, we have seen in the last couple of years interdivision rivals and even conference rivals, right, make trades with one another. So definitely not something to rule out in the realm of possibility. I think in today's age as well, you make a deal, you make a deal. Like you just hope it doesn't end up like you accidentally give a team their franchise quarterback for the next 15 years, or maybe years later trade with the same team and give them a wide receiver for said franchise quarterback that they still have. But when was the last time that happened, actually? Wait a minute. Anyways, no, good point. I think maybe I asked it just to be interesting, mainly because it's one of those things that's always fun to look at, to say the very least. And there could be some movement. But I relatively agree with Justin. I think I'm the one with the Browns at second overall in the mock, if I'm not mistaken. I say this without recollecting anything from last week. But I believe I do have the Browns. And it's very hard to see them not just going with Abdul Carter, even though they did end up keeping Myles Garrett. If they had ended up trading him, maybe this would be like the perfect, hey, here you go, out with the previous and in with the next guy to take the reins. But potentially the two of them playing together makes it adds another pass rush threat to the AFC North that just so happens it would make the Bengals' life a bit tougher, to say the very least, and really everyone in that division for the most part. So it's definitely something to look at. I mean, Rick and I agree. We were in lockstep last week when it came to the Giants about how even if it's not the popular thing to do, they need to actually fully commit to this rebuild, and the way to fully commit to it is sometimes being patient and making the right choices when it comes to the talent that you select, and not overreaching for a quarterback that we can clearly see. And I think, boys, I don't want to say that necessarily about any of these guys in the top two of this class as a whole, because I did comment last week, I feel this is a pretty good backup quarterback class, but I feel like this year's class, I don't know if teams are going to fall for any of the hype people are trying to put on some of the other QBs. I think it's relatively certain we're going to get 2 first-round QBs in this class, and that's it. Now, there was only one a couple of years ago in the infamous Kenny Pickett draft, right? But there was the talk of, but what if Malik Willis could go? Extremely high. What about Desmond Ridder, right? He had just had the miracle season with Cincinnati. Matt Corral, right, from Ole Miss. There were these other guys that through weeks of the process, and we've talked about this multiple times on the show, right, of the smoke and the mirrors of the campaign going into the draft and trying to make you get excited for these guys. Like Shador and Cam Ward, I actually do think there's something to look at being excited for, not necessarily with the rest. So it'll be interesting to see if this ends up, like Rick said, if there is a run, is someone willing to break it? But even if they are, would they be willing to break it for a quarterback? I think would be the next question. And I think it's something very interesting. Drafts are always fun to speculate. It's fun to speculate with everything, right? But especially in what trades we could see. And I don't know, for my money's worth, I think it'd be fun if someone in the top 5 traded, but what do I know?
Of course, it'd be great if it happened. I just don't, like I said, I don't think that it's that teams wouldn't trade out. I don't think that there's talent there. I just don't think that the talent there is as highly touted and proven enough that teams are going to be willing to give up the assets needed to get into the top 5.
Mhm.
If one of these guys falls, though, I could totally see that. Like I said, that 6 to 10 range, I expect some movement.
Yeah, I feel like once you get past what you think you're drafting in that 3 or 4 range, 5 through 10 or so kind of get a little fuzzy. It really depends upon needs, because I get, Ward and Sanders and Hunter and Carter are your primary 4. But then after that, you got the linemen, you've got Genty, Dart, a couple of receivers here and there, some corners I think that could be top 10 material as well in this draft coming up. It's interesting. It's interesting to see but again, that I think will fall into needs versus best player available, because when you're swinging that high for a pick, you don't want to go for somebody that's not necessarily a need. Apparently, Atlanta knew more than we did about picking Michael Penix at 8 last year, but that's another discussion for later on in the show, I think.
Indeed. So it'll be something to discuss, to say the very least. And maybe my question was more so a thing of, like, I asked not specifically the top 5, but maybe if we had, like Justin said, maybe expand that out to the top 10 or 12. I am of that mindset where we probably, because was it, I don't believe it was last year's draft. Was it 2 or 3 drafts ago that it started to become a very trade heavy draft? I remember.
Remember it was It was not last year, but the year before that the Texans drafted Stroud at 2, then traded with the Cardinals to get Anderson at 3. Then the Cardinals, I think, traded back into the top 10 to get Paris Johnson. I think they were 12, and they traded back into the top 10 to get Paris Johnson. I think 6. So that was a little crazy. Last year was kind of by the numbers.
Every team has their first round pick this year.
Yeah.
There's no teams with more than one pick.
The Dolphins weren't caught tampering this year, so yeah, they have their pick.
When was the last time that happened?
Feels like a couple years.
Every team has their pick.
Yeah, for now, until David Tepper blows everything up.
Of course, for now, but
Yeah.
I wonder when the last time that happened was, because it seems like something that might be an anomaly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely not the last couple drafts, because there was the draft year where the Eagles had a couple first round picks. Obviously, we know the Bears because of the Bryce Young deal in last year's draft. The Texans, it's like Rick kind of mentioned, it was like a game of tennis with the Cardinals. It's like, but the Texans ended up technically having 2 first round picks last year. So it's like, by default, that means not everyone can have theirs. Like, not every team.
One person has to duplicate, and all of a sudden everyone has it.
So it's
no one there.
God, maybe 2020 or 2021.
It's the first time in the 32-team era.
Really?
So it hasn't happened since before then. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's since
if everyone keeps their own pick. Although a comment that I saw too, which was really interesting, was it's very weird for the Browns to own their own pick. Because usually.
So, to say the very least. So, actually, before we do get going, and by the way, I will say for the record, in the background of this, boys, if we do want to make any callbacks to it, I do have the Google Doc pulled up on my PC of the 3-round mock we did last year. So, if there's any particular players that we want to compare to where they ended up, because I know Rick mentioned Michael Penix and where he went versus where we ended up picking him, we could also have that for the people to discuss. It's always just fun to look back at it, to say the very least. So I do have that pulled up. Really quick before we do move on to the main event of the evening, the meat and potatoes, as some people say. Justin, I didn't get to ask you this, of course, because we did our episode with Bars a couple weeks back. Did get to ask the Podfather, so I want to ask you. Russell Wilson is bringing the Danger Witch to the Meadowlands. So if you go out to a game this season, even if it is a Jets game, are you going to get the Danger Witch before or after? But no, in all seriousness, what do you make of the Giants' puzzling QB decision here before we move on?
I mean, I think that the Giants are much more confident in the QB class next year. It's a bit deeper, a lot of highly touted guys. Obviously, not everyone is guaranteed to come out, but I think that the Giants see an opportunity to get some more young talent, still have a good draft pick next year, have some money come off the books. I mean, they have Neighbors still. They have Tyrone Tracy Jr. now. They can maybe run into some linemen. They can get some help along the defensive line, although I think that they're pretty solid there. They can get some help in the secondary, which they may need. Although their defense, I think, was pretty good last year. They'll clean house coaching and GM, and they'll give a new franchise, the keys to the franchise to a new guy. And they'll, mandate that you can't take a quarterback this year, and I'll run it into the ground.
Basically.
In a controlled demolition.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sounds about right, to say the very least. I mean, I think we could all agree if they do end up picking Shador, let's just say that Deion Sanders is going to look good in some giant blue in 2026, to say the very least.
I don't know, man. Deion signs a big money contract now.
Let's be real.
A lot of money to leave on the table.
Sometimes these contracts aren't worth the paper they're written on, to say the very least.
Well, if the money doesn't come through, then obviously I'd get out of there too. But I can't imagine he's leaving all that money on the table.
I mean, the Mara family might pay. You never know. Anyways, so let's move on from that. Let's go on to the main event. Of course, as we've done the last couple of years, in this case, 2024 draft look back. So basically, the three of us will look back at last year's proper NFL draft, and we will give 3 hits, predominantly of the first round, guys. 3 hits of the first round, 3 misses in our opinion of the first round, and 3 should have been first rounders. Now, for the people watching this in the time capsule that this will be, because watch one of the misses that each of us pick will somehow like just have a breakout campaign in 2025, and it's going to be like, you said this. This is strictly a rookie season report card, essentially. We are grading this right now based on what we saw in the first year and the amazing things we saw or the concerns that we saw from various players. It's not to say that this is lockstep. This will be the sealed fate of these players, because if you are going to judge a player on the first season of their career, a human on their first month or 2 on the job, then Rick probably would have gotten rid of me as an intern very quickly in our college days, to say the very least. I was a bumbling buffoon when it came to certain things. But it took time. That's what these teams are going to do. But we're going to give some rookie QB grades. So, Podfather, as I mentioned to you, let's go. I believe we just went like 1-1-1-1-1-1 like that. Or did we do all 3? I figured it out.
No, I don't know. We'll do whatever.
We'll go one at a time very quickly. So, Podfather, with the first of your 3 hits very quickly, who is one of the first hit that you had of last year's 2024?
Well, you know that I like to kind of mix things up a little bit and go for guys that you might not be thinking about right away. And so that's where I'm going at number 1 for me, Graham Barton, Tampa Bay. Because, look, Ryan Jensen was their starting center there for years, and to seamlessly transition to a guy in Barton who was kind of touted more as a guard for them, but then played every game in the regular season as their center and really didn't miss a beat. That offense kind of kept going in that aspect, I think was huge for them. It was the right call for them to make. They found the right guy. He made sense. And, he basically sat himself down, won that job in camp, and then proved why they drafted him. It was a lower-end first-round draft pick, but it was a guy who won his spot and won the right to keep that spot for years to come, so long as he stays healthy over there. So, and I liked him going into the first round of that draft too. I really thought he was going to be a good offensive lineman before we picked him up, and had to go to Tampa. So, give the win there for Barton and the Bucs.
To say the very least, it was a fantastic pick by Tampa Bay, and seamlessly coming in and being the next guy to potentially be an anchor on that line for even longer than Jensen was there, to say the very least. So, a very good first round pick there by Tampa Bay. And they've actually had some pretty good first-round picks here for quite a while in Tampa with their franchise building. Justin, who's the first of your hits from last year's first-round draft?
I'm going to go with a guy in the same vein on the other side of the ball. I'm going to go with Jared Verse to come in to fill a hole left by a surefire Hall of Famer and one of the most dominant players we've seen at that position. For Jared Verse to come in and edge, which is different than the nose tackle that what's his name was?
Aaron Donald.
Yeah, Aaron Donald. Only 4.5 sacks, but really a dominant force on the ball. The NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year helped put that Rams team into contention. I mean, they were well coached. The offense was good. He was a focal point in that defense, and teams had a game plan and scheme to stop this rookie from just wrecking their offensive game plan. And he just, to come in and thrive in a position where you got big shoes to fill. I mean, he came in and he made the world know why it's dangerous to have the Rams with a first-round pick. Because they've been finding these guys without him, and then you gave them an opportunity to come in early, and they got exactly what they were looking for.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, giving them a first-round pick, because there's a fair chance at least one of us are going to mention another Rams pick in this draft here in a little bit. Shout out to, I hope every Rams scouting department staff guy the last 3 years has been getting bonuses, to say the very least, because this team has drafted extremely well for several years now. A lot of it without the first-round pick, like you said, so there's that. This is relatively an easy one to select, because of how good he was. But I think the reason why I'm going to mention him is because a couple guys at his position went earlier than him in the draft. Being taken in the back third of the draft, he was selected 23rd overall in what ended up being a trade situation for the two teams. And while one team is hoping that the guy they drafted can still end up doing something, this team didn't have to wait long. I have to go with the home run of Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jacksonville Jaguars at the 23rd overall pick. The three of us obviously highly rated him last year to begin with. We drafted him, I'm looking back at our mock, we drafted him, funny enough, 18th overall, just ironically, one spot away from the Jags' original selection in our mock, to say the very least. And Brian Thomas Jr., aces. Like a number one wide receiver, bona fide stud for the Jaguars. In a season where their quarterback play was pretty inconsistent, mind you. And if he's making a Pro Bowl, and if he's making this all-rookie team that easily, like this early, with this kind of instability, if Trevor Lawrence could become a franchise quarterback, or if a franchise quarterback ever finds their way to Jacksonville for some really weird reason, to say the very least, they can rely on the fact that Brian Thomas Jr. is a baller. You hope to get this kind of talent. Maybe you sometimes get lucky with a later round pick. This is the one of, if not the best trades from last year's draft. And you trade down, and you get this kind of player at 23. It's amazing, to say the very least. Like, no questions asked. Brian Thomas Jr. by the Jags. That was a hit and a half, to say the very least. Podfather, I'll throw it back to you. Your second hit of last year's first round draft.
I mean, it's hard to look at this first round and not talk about the guy who was a whisker away from making history and had one of the best rookie seasons in his position that we've seen, led his team to an incredible run, and knocking off the teams that he did in the postseason, and especially knocking off the number one seed in your division, and just the way that it's systematically dismantling the Detroit defense. Jake Daniels. I mean, the guy that I should have picked number one, to keep our tradition of getting the guys who actually go number two or lower who are better than the guy who went number one. I mean, it's fluky because you can't expect a 12-win season like that every time with the luck that they had on their side. I mean, the Hail Mary against Chicago was one thing, but the last-second touchdown against Philadelphia, then Marcus Mariota leading them on the drives, and then just the way they came out and destroyed those teams in the postseason, especially that Detroit game was just the most surprising game of the entire postseason up until the Super Bowl. But the young kid showed a lot of poise, confidence in the pocket, made a lot of good decisions, made teammates around him better. And if you're Washington, you have to be extraordinarily excited about what the future could be, because with having Jane Daniels there, looks like the sky's the limit for them. Now, yeah, the Super Bowl champion is in your conference and then in your division, so you play them twice in a row, twice a year, but you saw them 3 times last year, played them hard each time. I think won one of the games. So let's say you can't win 2. Win one when it counts.
More than fair. When you easily get a franchise quarterback, like that's as obvious as it might seem sometimes. Like teams have missed on these quarterbacks in the past, right? Or maybe there's a slow start. There was no slow start for Jaden Daniels, to say the very least. Like a little bit of adjustment, you could say. But once he hit his stride last season, man, everything flew for Washington. So not a bad pick at all, to say the very least. Justin, who is your second hit of last year's first round?
It's got to be the rookie receptions leader, right? Brock Bowers, the quarterback-proof tight end out of Notre Dame. Over 1,000 yards. Again, set a record for receptions for a rookie receiver. 5 touchdowns. Just really ran away with it offensively for this team. Kept them relevant at certain times of the season. And he played with, 4 or 5 different starting quarterbacks last year due to injury and issue and, coaching issues and all that stuff. So through all the turmoil, this kid was electric. He was one of the lone bright spots for the Raiders this season, unfortunately for them. But a bright spot nonetheless. And let's see what he does with his new quarterback in the Raiders Ring of Honor, Geno Smith.
Attaboy. Raiders country. Let's go to the Ring of Honor. No, not bad at all. And let me complete a trifecta of offensive players once again here. Look, this was one of the home runs we hit in last year's mock draft. I think a lot of people figured it. We knew he was going to go there. we saw the slow start. We probably kind of envisioned it, but we didn't expect how good it would become after that. But big Bo Nix, you got a Bo leave in Denver, but Bo Nix to the Denver Broncos. I mean, there was a bit of a marination period, right? It was probably in terms of the rookies last year, probably between him and Drake May in terms of like guys that got to play. Well, actually, in terms of day one starters between him, Caleb, and Jaden. Caleb had the natural talent. Jaden Daniels, of course, being highly selected, him as well. Bo Nix was kind of the guy that's like, well, timeline, right? Because he's a little bit older than the guys last year. Had the growing pains. It was a pretty bad first couple weeks for him last season. But once there was an understanding between him and Sean Payton, probably the most patient Sean Payton's ever been, you could argue, in his career. They flew, man. And the Broncos, they made this miracle run getting into the postseason after years of just struggles for this team, right? And years of missed quarterback selections and quarterback attempts in free agency after Peyton retired, right? Like, never forget, Trevor Siemian started games for that team, right? Joe Flacco, Case Keenum was meant to be the answer. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. Like that big, like 6'4", 6'5" kid that they drafted they traded up for out of Memphis.
Paxton Lynch.
Yeah, oh my God. Paxton Lynch. That's a name out of the past, to say the very least. So through it all, the Broncos this time, easy hit. You get your franchise quarterback. We're praising it for number 2. You get your likely franchise quarterback at 12th overall. It's pretty good. That is pretty good, to say the very least. All right, Podfather, ending with you. Give us your third and final hit from last year's first round.
So in preparing for this, I kind of gave 9 just in case, you guys have taken up some of my other ones there. So I have 3 left, and it's very interesting because 2 of them I was happy with their performance in year 1, but I'm excited for the potential of year 2. And then one of them did what we wanted him to do in year 1, but I know we'll see the trajectory for year 2. So I'll go with one of the other guys. And it's going to be a bit of a stretch in a way, but just hear me out with it. Because when he was on the field, he was as advertised. Now, he did get hurt and kind of scrapped the rest of the season, also behind some older veterans, but when he was on the field, he was a dominant player and was somebody who you could build a unit out of, and that's Olu Fashanu, the Jets. Mm. It was as advertised. We all lauded the pick in the first round. We thought it was the right guy to pick for them, to work on that offensive line with those veterans that were there. And he proved himself. He was a no-nonsense type of guy. He was on there. He was blocking. He was doing the right things. And, of course, the injury kind of hurt his season, and obviously he missed the best 5 or 6 games or whatever it was. But the small sample size you saw, there's a lot of excitement and potential if you can have him as your core anchor to an offensive line that can really start pushing people around. So I think he is a hit, was a hit, and will be a hit. It's just going to take some time, obviously, for him to get back to his playing dominance. But what we saw in the first year was very good. And I think Jets fans, which Justin is and I once was, but not anymore, will be very happy to have that have him there anchoring the offensive line for that.
I mean, for the record, they could still make a run, Podfather. Unless you've already done some simulating and they haven't yet. But
I have not yet. No, we have not.
So don't worry, guys. The Podfather's new team bracket coming soon, a couple weeks' time. Justin, first off, praise from Rick for the first round pick you guys picked last year. So what are we thinking for you?
I'll just take the compliment and I'll go with my next one. I'm gonna go with the other side of the town here for this one. I'm gonna go with Malik Neighbors, another 1,000-yard rookie season from one of these top receivers. Again, very little going on at quarterback. He was just fantastic. They rode him into the ground, and they threw everything they could at him, and they made the kid take a beating. But he kept getting up. He kept keeping his head up, and he kept making plays for this team all the way down the stretch. Finished with 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, over 100 receptions. Another team with back-to-back rookies in New York that have over 1,000 yards in their rookie season. And kudos to them on a good first-round hit. because a lot of people weren't so sure about Malik Neighbors coming out. I mean, a lot of people had him very high. A lot of people had him higher than Marvin Harrison. But there were more question marks about Malik Neighbors coming out. And I got to say, after 1 year so far, he's kind of shut him down.
More than fair to say, the very least. So for me, I'm going with an offensive lineman for my last pick. So I'm staying on the offense here. No disrespect to the defense, but just like some of these offensive guys really capture my mind. I'm also going to go offensive line, similar to the Podfather, but I'm going to pick another guy who he missed the first 2 games last season. Bit of a slow start. He ended up starting 13 of the 15 he got action in, but really started to come into form critically for his respective team late in the season last year. And as from what I've read, because I was reading up trying to see like, okay, like some of these guys, like what, like, because let's be honest, it wasn't 32 teams selected last year, because as we know, the fun fact from Justin's fun fact of the week about every team having a first round pick this year, and Rick subsequently adding more info to that, like where did some of these first round picks that we may have forgotten about from being selected, like what happened to them? And remember, boys, at 18th overall, the Cincinnati Bengals selected Amarius Mims in this draft, to say at the very least. They selected him, the Georgia offensive tackle. And it was a slow start for him, like I said, but he really started to roundabout into form. And as I was looking at, I was trying to see rookie report cards. What are Bengals fans saying about the kid? What is like off-season reports been saying about him? I've only seen heaps of praise from him. A lot of people happy with how he performed in the late stages of last season. I think it was the last 4 games of last season. He only allowed 2 total pressures on Joe Burrow, which, as we know, because of how critical last season's end of run of games was for the Bengals. The fact that your first-round offensive tackle as a rookie is able to be that great, that in those critical moments is something you need to see. But the praise that I've been seeing from him, from people in or around the Bengals organization, Trent Brown, who no longer is with the Bengals, he was with them last year. He's left to a new team in free agency. He had high praise. He believes that Mims has like Pro Bowl, All-Pro potential written all over him. Andrew Whitworth, Super Bowl champion, Rams great, Bengals great. Nothing but praise for what he has seen from Mims from last season into the offseason. When you have 2 very good offensive linemen and a team staple of that franchise praising you, that says a lot to me about the kind of campaign this kid had. Full 17-game season healthy. Joe Burrow needs to be upright more. They may have, we talked about, they got to make sure they protect him. I think they don't need to worry about one spot. Amarius Mims checks off that, to say the very least. And that's all that's what you ask for. When you draft a offensive lineman in the first round, I need you to be bona fide, protect the quarterback no matter what. And the Bengals, at least on one of the 5, don't have to worry at all for years to come potentially. And that's a big thing for them to be able to say going into this draft, which they may need to look at some more online, to say the very least. So that is my 3rd and final hit. So those are our total hits of this first round. Oh, I feel sad. I feel so bad for whichever one of these kids ends up having a rough career because we decided to praise them. Anyways, let's move on, to say the very least. Let's go, boys, to our 3 misses of the first round of this draft. It was a little bit tough at first. I was trying to go through it. I'm like, I feel like I'm being a little bit nitpicky on some of these guys, so it might be a bit tough. So I will actually, no. Justin will go first. Here. So, Justin, you will give your first miss of this past first round in the 2024 first round of the NFL draft.
So I'm finding myself being a bit nitpicky also, because really there weren't a ton of misses, I would say, at least not player-wise. I think a lot of these guys that came out in the first round this last year, there wasn't really like a bona fide bust. There's guys that were a little more disappointing than others, and maybe you could say there's an issue with where they were picked, or they just got hurt. You can't control that. That doesn't make the player a bust as of yet. But that's why I'm going to be nitpicky, and my first one is going to be Michael Penix. And again, not for anything that the kid did, but what is going on in Atlanta? Honestly. You sign Kirk Cousins, you go all in. This is a Super Bowl roster. We have a good pick. We're going to make the team better. I don't want to say waste, but you waste the pick on a quarterback that you know is not going to play this year. So now you have 2 quarterbacks on 4-year contracts, one with an option and one that's getting paid, $240 million and eating up half your cap space. And you're going to split reps between them during the season while you're still in a playoff race. I get that Kirko was disappointing down the stretch. I mean, he came in on fire, and then all of a sudden he dipped hard enough that you brought in the rookie quarterback. And then now you're in the same position this year. You can get out of it And instead, you guarantee his contract, and you don't let the rookie that you were kind of impressed with at the end of the year get that spot. I just don't understand what we're doing. It seems like a waste of the number 7 overall pick, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a miss.
Yeah.
It's not a miss on the player; it's a miss on the team and on the franchise.
Yeah, and the thing is, miss can be construed in a number of different ways. And you mentioned injury, and honestly, for me, injury has played a role in a couple of the guys that I have listed down here. Right, like it just happens. And in the case with Penix, it's like you said, like the mismanagement of assets by the Atlanta Falcons. Like this is a tale to show to new GMs. So this is what you're not going to do in your respective sport, right? Like just to say the very least, it's a bit of a mess there. So I'll go next. My first miss, like you said, Justin, I don't think there were necessarily too many busts in this first round as of now. Like I think a lot of these kids showed great potential, and even the ones that didn't get to, it's because of injury. Again, we're only saying this for these guys as of now. Several of the names that we're about to say are likely going to be proving us wrong in a year's time, right? And we hope for that because we want an influx of players to constantly come into this league. This is a guy that, funny enough, I'm going to list him as a miss, but it's not because of his talent. I think he's going to have a chance this next season to really break out. And if we did this again this time next year, if we did like a 2-year follow-up, he would probably be one of my hits. And it wouldn't surprise me with the praise I'm seeing from him coming out of in this preseason so far, or offseason so far. But Jordan Morgan, drafted 25th overall by the Green Bay Packers. You know, he was a guy that, we talked about him in the draft process last year. He's a very intriguing prospect, great tackle in his college days, gets drafted to the Packers, gets hurt, big time injury. So he misses a lot of time, only suited up in 5 games last year for the team. And they kind of played him out of position. He was drafted. He was a tackle in college. They put him as a guard. Now I know it can happen. It's happened plenty of times. Guards, centers, guards, tackle. Like it can always happen. I'm not saying it's not possible, but for a guy coming back from injury, for the snaps that you get him to play, not at the position that he played when he was in college, a bit of a mismanagement on the Packers end, if you ask me. But it's not in any way lost for the kid, because I have seen reports in this offseason that they are planning to put him in a position battle to potentially get that starting left tackle position. And if you're the Green Bay Packers, if you may have found that diamond in the rough to be your franchise left tackle for years to come, I praise the Bengals for it. The Packers may do it now, but it has to be a miss for now because the kid, bad injury luck, missed games, and the bit of playing time he did see last year, it was out of position. And we'll see if he can. Maybe if he stays at guard, it'll be better in year 2. That's perfectly fine if that's also the case. But if he could be the tackle, that's even better. That's even better situation. So a miss for now, a future potential hit in this draft class. But Jordan Morgan, I have to list it because things could have been miles better last season, even when he, injury aside, when he did finally get to play as well. So that's my pick.
I have 3. I have 3 spicy misses, and they're for different reasons. But I'm trying to figure out which way to go first.
I almost want to have just me and Justin go back and forth first, and you give all 3, but you can give yours.
Well, I don't want to take it. You know what I mean? Sometimes.
Right. So,
yeah, I mean that's the thing is that the 3 that I'm looking at, I have other guys, but the 3 that I'm looking specifically are all for various different reasons. But here I'll go with this one because it's a miss, but only because of a guy who was taken by the same team later on that outperformed him, I think. Quinion Mitchell of the Eagles, I think, is a miss. Because when you think of this Eagles secondary and you think of the story of how this team ran, do you think of Quinion Mitchell or do you think of the guy who was taken in the second round, Cooper DeJean? You think of Cooper DeJean instead. Mitchell's a good player. Very solid rotation player for them. I think he'll have a great career there. But right now, everyone's talking about the other kid, Cooper DeJean, out of Iowa, because of the pick 6 in the Super Bowl, because of just how strong he's been playing for them, and because he was the guy who we thought was going to go higher up. Mitchell only rose because of the pro day stock, but DeJean might have the better career long term. Both good players, but I think if you flip the 2, I think you get the value more correct. And having DeJean go in the first round, Mitchell in the second round for me. So it's a little controversial because he was a good player, but I think it's the miss because the guy who was drafted on the same team behind him was just a little bit better than he was.
And that happens sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Like a guy could be a good enough first round pick. He's just being outperformed, ironically, in this case, by a teammate.
Exactly.
And it could be also very much be a case where he will be able to make the most of more opportunities coming next season because there's definitely plenty of space to eat in that Eagles secondary
Mhm.
until they randomly trade for Alexander from the Green Bay Packers, and we are expected to see an Eagles repeat at that point. But until that may or may not happen, I say that as partially a joke. Let's continue. So, Justin, your second miss of this past first round. Rick, that's a pretty good one by Rick, to say the very least. So, let's see where we continue with this, Justin. Let's see if the trend that Justin and I mentioned when it comes to injuries and stuff, let's see if that also continues with our following names here.
And let's see if he unmutes himself first.
You never know. You know what? I'll do it. I'll go with Caleb Williams. And again, I don't necessarily think it's his fault. He wasn't so terrible his first year. I mean, he wasn't great. He wasn't what all the hype looked like he was going to be. He wasn't the best quarterback that came out last year, obviously. So for all those reasons, you know, he wasn't number one overall. I mean, obviously, number one overall pick worthy there was Jaden Daniels. So the Bears didn't do him any favors. The offensive line was rough. We knew it was going to be rough. They thought that they could bypass that the way the Bengals did early in Joe Burrow's career by drafting Jamar Chase. Getting him Keenan Allen and, having Cole Kmet and DJ Moore there wasn't the answer. So what do you do to rectify this in the future? Because the Caleb Williams that you saw needs to improve. He can't be your number one overall pick. He can't be the guy that you spent all that capital on, which, I mean, it's just one pick, but it's all that capital on, and then have him play like that. He needs to be better. So it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, they should have fired the head coach in the offseason, like we all said several times before that. Nobody knew what they were doing. He was an embarrassment, especially on Thanksgiving. And then now we're in the position where the Bears have fired a head coach after a rookie season of a number one overall pick for the last 5 times in a row that they drafted a quarterback in the first round. So not ideal, not a great trend. We've seen it all the way back since who was it, Rex Grossman and John Fox? And let's hope he can turn it around because he's got the talent. It's there. It's a team game. People forget that sometimes. It's a team game. You need to figure out how you're going to game plan to get this kid into better positions and give him the tools to succeed.
So Rome Odunze was actually one of the hits that we didn't talk about, but to Justin's point, and forgive me, we're about to get canceled, but it's okay. 2 things that might help the Bears this season. 1, Ben Johnson being hired as the head coach. Offensive minded head coach is great. And number 2, the owner's dead. So new ownership. Sorry.
And on that note, let me move on to my second miss of the first round. I don't necessarily want to call this kid a miss. I think part of the reason I'm going to say this is only because there were some struggles from him last season. He was penalized a decent bit for this team. It didn't help that they had a down year compared to years past. And there were some really good players drafted at similar position to him after he was drafted. I'm talking about Tyler Guyton for the Dallas Cowboys, who was selected 29th overall. Now, here's the thing. If I had a nickel for every single time the Dallas Cowboys drafted an offensive lineman in the first round within the last couple of years, whose first name was Tyler, I would have 2 nickels, which is not a lot, but it's kind of weird it happened twice. They have Tyler Smith on the team, and he has proved to be very good, to say the very least. All-Pro selection, I believe, a couple Pro Bowls. Kid's good. Fairly certain that Guyton is going to clean up everything, right? I'm only saying this just because, you had a big, not necessarily in his later years he was at the same level, but just the presence of Tyrone Smith being gone from the Cowboys after so long. You pick a guy in Guyton to try to help fill that void. And there were some struggles. There were holding penalties. And what was a bad year for the Dallas Cowboys? A couple flaws from some of these guys showed. It's not that he's not a bad player. Realistically, he's a pretty good player. Even looking back at our mock draft, we're picked relatively close. We picked him in the early 30s, right? We picked him at 36 overall. So that kind of pick discrepancy between a mock of what we thought of him and where he was drafted, that's not that bad of a discrepancy. I believe the biggest discrepancy we've seen from picks was actually, Justin already mentioned it, Michael Penix. He was drafted 8th overall in real life. Rick picked him 70th overall in our mock last year. So that kind of lets you know where we were at, right? So I think Guyton, again, is another case. I feel like all 3 of these guys I'm going to list are probably going to have really good second seasons in the league. But I think Guyton's going to clean up his mistakes. He's going to be perfectly fine. It's just on the looking at guys that were selected in the first round were all offensive linemen who made impacts. Some guys that were selected after the first round that were offensive linemen, and also the down season of the Cowboys. You kind of have to call it just comparative to his fellow classmates, but still likely going to end up being a very solid pick for the team. And if he really is the left tackle of the future, or maybe they swap it around, maybe he's going to be a right tackle. You never know. Like, they'll find a role for this kid. I think there's too much potential there for them not to be able to figure it out. It just has to be a little bit cleaner in 2025.
All right, so Guyton was one of my considerations, but not a spicy guy. I have two spicies left. I'm going to go with one because I think Jerry's going to go with the other one, which is fine. But let me tell you something. It's not fun to be a rookie in this league on a bad team, to watch your coach get fired like Caleb Williams did, but also to not win your starting job out of camp and lose it to Jacoby Brissett. Drake May was a miss this year for the Patriots. Now, I get it. He may become a better player now that he's got a season under him, but when you draft a quarterback number 3 overall, you're trusting them to be your starter day one. You know, injuries, you can't avoid them. That's why J.J. McCarthy's not on my list, because you can't avoid them. And also Sam Darnold got really hot, much to the chagrin of Justin and all other Jets fans, because, you know, we can't have anything nice in our lives. But Drake May had all these opportunities to just outperform and outclass and outgun, and he never did. And then when he finally got his chance to get onto the field, the results were mediocre at best. And you don't want to say, and you can say it's not, but I mean, part of the reason why Gerard Mayo was fired from this team was because there wasn't growth from the year before when Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi were leading the team in the quarterback position. Obviously, the rest of it was because they wanted Mike Vrabel instead, because Robert Kraft, you know, plantations and everything. But at the same time, you gotta think that Drake May's performance had some hand in that too. So he wasn't a hit. And again, if he performs better this year, then that's better for him. Turn it around. But unfortunately, the last couple of North Carolina quarterbacks in this league, Sam Howell and Mitchell Trubisky, there's not a good pedigree of people to run after those guys. So
how dare you disrespect TJ Yates' legacy?
Well, he wasn't like recent. He's far back.
Still, that's something to chase after. That man has, I think, 2 career playoff wins. That's a lot. It's more than any Bears quarterbacks had in a while.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. Sure, why not?
So, to say the very least. All right. Well, that's 2 out of 3 down for all of us. Let's move on to the third. Very interested to see who Rick thinks will be my third one that I might take from his spicy selection. So, Justin, your third and final miss of last year's first round. Well, the biggest miss is him being muted presently. Yeah. I'm convinced it's a purposeful bit at times when he mutes himself and speaks.
I'm not logged in as you anymore, George, so I can't mute him myself.
So, you know, I'm not in my domain. So when there's people walking around, I gotta make sure there's no sound in the studio. You know what I mean?
We appreciate it.
I'm gonna say Troy Fautanu is my next one. Again, for no other reason that he missed the whole year, and it was something that killed the Steelers. I mean, they really, really needed help along that offensive line, and they spent a high pick on him, and they needed him last year. And they had real opportunity to make some noise a little bit like farther down the year. And it was unfortunate, but he could not get it done.
He was actually on my short list because of that, and also a name who I'm going to list in the next section that kind of makes you like, huh, interesting. Although, to be fair, I think the Steelers would have been killed for making this pick anyway. But I mean, it worked out. So, all right, my third and final pick. I mean, let's just continue the trend with injuries, Justin, that we've talked about. I think I'm most likely leaving Rick's last guy here because this was the top guy on my list that came to mind. But just Darius Robinson, 27th overall to the Arizona Cardinals. Again, injury. Kid barely got to play any games. I did see reports, and I read up that there are still those in the Cardinals organization that believe in plenty of good for him. They think that with his rehab from injury and the little bits and pieces and flashes that they saw last year at the very end of the season, that there is something there with him. So, truth be told, like, Darius Robinson deserved to be a first-round pick last year. He had the talent, just did not get to prove himself, right? And so, like Justin just mentioned, that's what it is. Sometimes when you just don't get to prove yourself, like in a year span, which is what we have to grade on. And again, this is strictly the first year of their NFL career. Is this a miss or hit as of now? You have to say a guy that didn't really get to play for you a lot is a miss when you consider, once again, kind of what I said earlier with the Guyton pick, guys that were drafted in a very similar range of him, and then the fellow guys of his position drafted before and after him. You have to label it as a miss for now. We'll see if he is in it for a big 2025, but for now it's a miss. It has to be. Like with Justin's pick, I don't think he only played one game, but I think he only played, I think I saw 5. Like, the best ability is availability, right? So need him to be way more available next year.
See, I was prepared. I had Nate Wiggins from Baltimore at 30 because his stats weren't really up to par. I had Dallas Turner out of Minnesota because we thought he was going to be the defensive rookie of the year, and then he was middling at best. Jared Verse was a lot better. But you sewed it up for me on a silver platter. Let's talk about the Maserati that wasn't a Maserati. Marvin Harrison Jr. Because you could say at the very end of it all, 885 yards receiving, 8 touchdowns, fine. 62 catches on 116 targets over the year. 116 targets. And just for comparison, which is the thief of joy, the stats were similar to his father. Marvin Harrison in his senior in his first year had 64 catches for 836 yards and 8 touchdowns. So when you're drafted higher than your father was drafted, with more hype than your father had when he was drafted, normally that means perform better than your father did when he was drafted, right? Didn't happen for Maserati here. He was more like a Pinto than anything else in some of these games. And so, and I'm also saying this as a disgruntled fantasy owner that had him and took him pretty high and then cut him because he was atrocious in my league. So you want bigger things from a guy who was picked 4th overall as the top wide receiver, because you want a guy who you can build a team around and not be in the same sentence of 4th overall picks as Kyle Pitts, which is where he currently is now.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely considered it. It's one of those things where the 3 immediate receivers or so drafted after him were better than him.
Yep.
Like, had better rookie season, let's be honest.
Yep.
Malik Neighbors, phenomenal rookie season. Mm-hmm. I mentioned Brian Thomas Jr. in the last segment, right? Phenomenal rookie season, picked 19 picks later. And Roma Dunze, like, for what was a very difficult rookie season for Caleb Williams, and a rookie wide receiver who had to try to have a share of receptions with DJ Moore, who's one of the best receivers in the league today, and with a veteran Keenan Allen, who still got his touches. Roma Dunze still racked up pretty good yardage, right?
Yeah.
Like, less touchdowns, but think about the sharing the field with two proven Pro Bowl, All-Pro caliber receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr. was supposed to be the definitive top guy getting all the targets. And he got all the targets. He didn't get all the receptions, to say the very least. Now, is that scheming? Is that various other things? We'll see. But a guy who, it's just on the statistics for him. It needs to be in the efficiency and level of play that happens in Arizona. That has to be the next step. And the number one deal of that offensive coaching staff this season, it has to be getting the clicking connection of Kyler Murray and Maserati Marv to be much, much better than what it was last season. So I don't blame the pick at all right there, Rick, to say the very least. All right. I will begin this third and final section for us. The 3 should have been first rounders for us, and I left a little bit of a seed there, did I not, when it came to Justin's selection for one of his misses, and that coincides with this selection for us. This guy was so underrated, we did not pick him in our 3-round mock last year, actually. I went back to check. But he ended up being selected 62nd overall by the Baltimore Ravens out of the University of Washington, just like a certain Pittsburgh Steelers tackle that Justin mentioned, Roger Rosengarten. This kid had a phenomenal rookie season, to say the very least. Stepped in nearly right away, he didn't start in 3 of the games for the Ravens this season, but once they put him in the lineup, the kid was extremely, extremely good for the team, to say the very least. He was named on the PFWA All-Rookie team, which, by the way, the other tackle, well, just so happened to be Joe Alt, who, honorable mention for it in this class. Of course, like, it's so obvious, it maybe doesn't necessarily need a definitive, but wow, when you're on the All-Rookie team and the other guy was the definitive best tackle in this class, that's pretty good, to say the very least. Man, you got to give the Ravens a shout. This is another team that tends to have like a pretty solid success rate with some of these, second to fourth round picks, like in that draft range. And this looks like it's going to be another hit right there, right? Like, just, jeez, like getting a tackle, starting caliber tackle who could start for a very long time for you. I've praised it for the first round picks. It's even better when it's a second round pick. So that's going to be my first guy who should have potentially been a first rounder in this past draft. So Roger Rosengart, right there. Podfather, so to you.
Yeah, I loved Roger Rosengart. Honestly, that was one of my top guys there. I also took a guy off of my list just now because the more I thought about it, where he was drafted, even though it wasn't the first round, it was like supremely close. So if one of you guys have him, I won't be surprised because he had an absolutely phenomenal season, and I think that he would be a guy. I think Justin's probably going to mention him in the next pick anyways because I think he knows what we're talking about. So I'm going to go with somebody who was picked in the 4th round, who fought for and won his starting job, and also joined Mr. Rosengart, I believe, on that all-rookie team you're mentioning there. That would be Bucky Irving.
Yep.
Running back out of Tampa Bay. 1,122 yards on the ground, 8 rushing touchdowns. Proved himself to be a more formidable running back than Rachaad White and a good spell back for him, and then took over because he just was a great downhill runner for them. He was their spell guy when they needed to get away from the passing game for a little bit. He had these electric plays that just made him really, really special. The first Tampa Bay running back to rush for over 1,000 yards in the season since Doug Martin in 2012. When you do something like that, you should have been a first rounder. And again, it just proves the value of these running backs when you have guys that are in the 4th round that are performing as well as Bucky Irving did. So shout out to him because that was a great first year that he had. And I'm excited to see what he does in year 2.
Yeah, I don't blame you. That was a fantastic gem, to say the very least, by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And again, we talked about praising them for some of the first round picks they've made. Some solid mid round picks as well in the history of this team. Just a pretty good organization when it comes to drafting on the Buccaneers, to say the very least. In recent years, maybe if you are a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan in your 60s and 70s and have somehow stumbled upon this podcast, there are draft nightmare stories from the early days of this franchise, to say the very least. So there's that. Justin, your first should have been guy for last year's draft.
All right, Rick, let's hit him. Let's do Ladd McConkey.
Yeah.
Just an all-around great rookie season. I mean, he started a little slow, took him a little bit to get his feet under him, but still finished with 82 receptions, 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns. He was the guy when they needed him to be, especially down the stretch, helped really push them into the playoffs. And just, was an all-around top 5 receiver out of this draft, for sure. So he had better stats in games and was more valuable than I think a lot of the guys that went before him. Not necessarily saying that makes them bad. They still had good years, but, there was debates that Ladd was going to go in the top 20, and he fell. And you're seeing why he shouldn't have fell.
To say the very least. Extremely talented and really became a guy, Justin. Like we talked about Harbaugh and what was going to occur with him, like in his first year, and they're going to be hard nosed, pound the rock in, but they relied on passing to be efficient. Ladd McConkey was a big part of it. By the way, for Ladd McConkey last season in our mock draft, we had him going. Imagine if this alternate timeline had played out. We had him going 40th overall to the Commanders. Could you imagine if they had kept the real pick in Jaden Daniels? Well, we actually also mocked Daniels to the Commanders. Can you imagine if they had Daniels and Ladd McConkey in this draft?
Yeah.
To say the very least. So, pretty good. Let me give the defense a little bit of love here. Look, this guy, I mean, Justin, you mentioned him as a guy who helped fill in the hole of Aaron Donald. Well, this guy also did a pretty good job trying to help in that, right? 8.5 sacks, 2 forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries. Braden Fisk, like just joining the last couple of years of second, third, fourth round guys that the Rams have drafted, especially on that defensive side of the ball, to help supplement things. Him and Verse together, along with some of their picks in the previous draft, right? That Rick and I brought attention to last season, and Bryant and Young, like just weapons on this defensive line for the Rams. And this kid came in like right away, didn't waste any time, established himself as an just absolute unit alongside his fellow young defensive linemen. That defensive line on this Rams team is scary, man. Like Aaron Donald himself, phenomenal talent. You could maybe argue once all these guys reach their peak, it'll be a better all-around line than maybe what they had when it was Donald, the best of the best. These other guys were pretty good, and he helped them. Whereas these guys could individually, pound for pound, maybe be the best all-around defensive front four that we may see in a while from the Rams. This is very great drafting that this team has done. Once again, I hope they're all in Aruba. Well, no, they have to do the draft first. So I hope they all get to go to Aruba and wherever else after this upcoming draft.
My second and my third selection are going to be with the same team because I thought about doing something for the memes. I thought about, telling you the story of Torrey Taylor, the punter for the Bears. Because I don't know if you remember the story about this, Drake, you probably do. When he was drafted, Caleb Williams called him and said, "Welcome to the team. Sorry, we're not going to be doing a lot of punting this year." And I think you could argue that Torrey Taylor should have been drafted over Caleb Williams in some ways. But I'm actually gonna go with a compensatory pick in the third round, a guy who was drafted thanks to his team trading away their former first-round quarterback, and that would be Peyton Wilson of the Steelers, who was only selected because of the Kenny Pickett trade. And this is a guy who, in his first season, on a line that has Highsmith, Herbig, Watt, guys that maybe not you would think about. He played all 17 games, started in 4 of them, 64 tackles, 2 passes defended, 1 pick. Also had a fumble recovery in that Cincinnati Bengals win that helped them go 10-7. Then he ran back for a touchdown. He returned a Burrow fumble 21 yards for the score. And the Steelers won that game by 6 points. That fumble recovery doesn't happen. Bengals win that game. He played a pretty decent role in the playoff game against the Ravens. 3 solo tackles, 6 total tackles as well. And again, it's a unit that may not have needed another guy on there, but they drafted right, and they drafted a kid who I think is going to be a mainstay over there. Because again, I know we talked a lot about what if they don't TJ Watt. Well, maybe Peyton Wilson becomes the next type of strong Steelers linebacker that's there too. So I liked him. I thought that he was a very good player for them, and it was a good pick. Again, compensatory picks that don't always work out, but when they do, you find diamonds in the rough like that.
Fun fact, real quick, for me mentioning Fisk, we had selected him in the third round of our podcast. Wilson was selected with the first pick of our second round by Justin to the Carolina Panthers.
Yep.
So heck of pick there, Justin.
Yep.
At the very least. I think we've established the three of us should probably be in a couple draft war rooms, to say the very least.
I think so.
Justin, who is your second name of should have been a first rounder?
Why don't we go along the offensive line, and why don't we go with Brandon Coleman out of TCU for the Washington Commanders? Ended up starting 12 games for this team. Pro Football Focus had him rated as the second best OT of any OTs taken in round 1. I mean, he really stepped up on a team that needed to prove something, I think. Listen, with a run like that, you're going to have rookies playing the way that you have them playing this year. That's an all-time draft class. And for him to come in and step in and be that reliable tackle for your rookie quarterback is huge. Obviously, we said some guys missed with injuries, some guys missed with, just shaky play, and maybe it's a system thing. But let me tell you, this kid stepped up big and definitely was worth higher than the third round that he went.
Yeah, to say the very least. And we were talking about last season, going into last season, one of our concerns for the Commanders, for Jane Daniels, was going to be the offensive line. Because it was kind of like a kind of put together unit, right? There wasn't, the Commanders didn't really have a run of form before that of all right, this was the big signing boom, long-term contract on an offensive lineman, or neither did they have that highly touted, highly drafted prospect, right? It was kind of various guys. And you mentioned Coleman there, Justin, like a big find in the third round to have as a lock steady piece. And they've continued to add to that in the draft. Well, not in the draft, with draft picks because they traded for Larry Tunsil, right? So the Commanders understand the mission to protect their franchise quarterback. And Coleman was one of the big steps as to helping that you don't need to worry about a position this year, right? To say the very least. I want to give a shout out to some guys that I was very much considering picking with my selection. I know Cooper DeJean would be the most obvious secondary guy that was not drafted in the first round, but I do want to give a shout out to Kool-Aid McKinstry and Max Melton, two guys who I think actually have pretty solid rookie campaigns on their respective teams. McKinstry especially getting more time after the Marshawn Lattimore deal from the Saints, him leaving the Saints. I think it was stepped in, played a little bit more. I think it should be a very interesting year two for him. And Max Melton as well, like that Cardinal secondary when, aside from Budda Baker, how many guys can you name? Especially because they had drafted Byron Murphy, who left the team, who now just got a contract in Minnesota. So, but Max Melton actually proved himself to be pretty good for them. So I want to give a fair shout out to both those guys, and shout out to the Rutgers Scarlet Knights for producing some draft picks here. But look, I love this guy in last year's draft. I'm almost fairly certain he was a first round pick in last year's draft. In fact, I know he was a first round pick in last year's draft because, funny enough, we had him picked for the right team. We just had the round of the pick wrong. Rick had this guy 13th overall last year. He ended up going in the 40s, but he went to the same team. Jackson Powers Johnson. Dude, this so talented. Like, we knew he was going to be such a good player, and he has even surpassed our expectations. You could argue probably the best interior offensive lineman selected in last year's draft class. And there were some solid guys selected in this draft class, right? So he's very good. But the fact that, like, again, after the rookie season, you have to rely on what reports are you getting from the offseason. What are team personnel saying about guys? What are maybe guys around the team saying about them? Legends of the team, right? Max Crosby has been training with Jackson Power Johnson. Oh God! if Max Crosby, fourth round pick of the Raiders, turned into one of the best sack producers in the league today, if he's going to help this kid get into what could be the best shape of his career already in year two, all pro selections on both sides of the line are about to occur for the Raiders. If only they were so much better and they could fill in the other 20 starters around both these guys. But they at least have two foundational pieces. Jackson Power Johnson's a phenomenal player. A lot of teams screwed up not picking him because he would have been a staple for an offensive line for a decade plus to come. And the Raiders get to benefit with that for now until they eventually screw it up and they trade him away in a couple of years because he doesn't want to be there. But until that happens, they get to enjoy that pick. So this is the obvious one for me. Jackson Power Johnson. Should have been a first-round pick by far.
Well, boys, it's time for me to cheat a little bit. And it's time for me to, even things out a little bit as well. Because I heaped a lot of praise on Justin Jets picking Olu Fashanu. Now I'm going to heap some mockery their way. Not because of somebody that they picked, but because of something that happened to them. So, backstory. 9 first-round picks of the 2024 draft were 2023 consensus college football All-Americans. On that consensus list, there were a couple of guys there that also went like second or third round. Now, this list also included guys like Peyton Wilson, who we just mentioned, Dallas Turner, Cooper DeJean, Laiatu Latu, I think was a first-round guy who we didn't mention as well. Mm-hmm. But there's a guy who was a consensus All-American in 2023 who went undrafted. Now, I'm not going to say that he should have been drafted number 1 because, undrafted and you're a first-round guy, it's a bit questionable. But when you pick off Aaron Rodgers twice in one game, and I don't care that he's a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers. I don't care about that. That, to me, means something. And this is a guy who impressed every stop that he went. Beanie Bishop, the quarterback out of Pittsburgh, not drafted, picked off Aaron Rodgers twice in week 7. Then the following week made the game-ending pick to beat the Giants of Daniel Jones. Defensive rookie of the month in October, 16 tackles, 5 pass deflections, 3 picks. Ended the year with 34 tackles, a half a sack, 7 pass deflections, and 4 interceptions. Someone tell me why this kid wasn't drafted. So you play your way onto the team. He was a first-team All-Conference USA in 2021, first-team All-Big 12 and All-American in 2023. Someone tell me why this kid wasn't drafted. He performed his way, should have been drafted, and I'll go so far as to say it. I think he would have been a better pick than Ricky Pearsall at 31 for the Niners. You know, I think it would have been a much better pick there. So it's a cheat, but I already mentioned my punter, so I'm good in the eyes of the Jurg. So give me my undrafted kid, Beanie Bishop, and put him back in the first round.
Yeah, he's not wrong. That's fine with me.
I see.
I mean, like, to be fair, we did say should have been first round, so you can say, like, undrafted should have been a first rounder. I mean, I'm sure we could say that about a very small handful of guys throughout the history of this league.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, well, really, Rick, you better hope the Jets don't go far in this bracket, because Justin, if the Jets somehow win this bracket for the second year in a row, first off, I think if they somehow win this bracket for the second year in a row, I think you just need to stick with them for the rest of your life once again.
We're not taking him back. We don't want him. What happened when he came back?
I was going to say, what was the first round matchup? I can't wait for the Jets to lose some no-name indoor football league team in the first round. That'd be great.
We'll give you a moment to look back at the bracket.
Yeah.
We'll give you a moment to look back at the bracket, as this will be the last should have been first round pick. Justin, who you got?
We mentioned before. I'm going to talk about my guy Tyrone Tracy Jr. He was electric for a team that was terrible. He stepped up when injury occurred. Still had over 1,000 yards all-purpose this year. Still had 6 touchdowns all-purpose this year, and that includes in his first game only tallying 12 total carries for 29 yards. So in 16 games, that's not true. In 13 games, he actually ends up with over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, helps that Giants team look like they may know what they're doing drafting a little bit. Again, with very little quarterback help and some pretty poor offensive line play, this kid was really electric and helped this team be better than they should have been. So, Tyrone Tracy Jr.
Yeah, pretty good pick right there. And should be interesting if somebody gets to throw to him or hand him off the ball in a couple of years here, to say the very least, a future Giants quarterback. Arch Manning. Who said that? Anyways, Rick, I give you a moment. Were you able to go back in the bracket? Who are the Jets facing?
The champions of the Arena League, which, remember, we talked about that mind-blowing fact that one time with the Iowa Woo, the Duluth Harbor Monsters. Great name. Even more fun when they win.
Not bad to say the very least. That's just you can't deny Duluth Harbor Monsters. It's
I'd rather him be a Duluth Harbor Monster fan than a Jets fan.
That's fine. That's fine. I know the bars around where you live. So it's okay.
You know, I mean, look what happened. He was a Jets fan. They were terrible. He left. There was hope. Aaron Rodgers tore his ACL. We never found out what that was. He came back. Everything fell apart. You know what I mean? I can't say that it's definitively Rick, but we'll see.
So I was with you, and it was bad. I left. Your star quarterback tore his ACL 4 plays into the game.
Which is the most Jets thing ever.
I come back. They're bad, but your star quarterback plays the whole season.
Well, because the rest of the team was bad. They were a better team when Rodgers was down than they were last year with Rodgers.
Of course, when you're not paying the guy $105 million in one season to be your starting quarterback and be terrible.
It was basically the same team.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, then he got more of his guys. I was surprised David Bakhtiari didn't join the Jets last year at some point.
Me too.
If Rodgers is still there, he probably would have this year.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this year's 2024 NFL mock draft look back. Wow, how literally time flies when it comes to a year ago. These guys were drafted. They've played, some really good, some not so much. Some didn't really play all that much, to be fair, as well. And we'll just continue to see how many of these careers pan out. Praise be to the guys who have phenomenal careers here, and apologies to anyone we may have cursed with the praise heaped upon me in this episode, to say the very least. So of our hits and our should have beens, so that's like 9 plus 9, that's 18. I really hope we didn't curse most of those guys. I hope for the most part they all have good careers.
18 players each.
18 players. Oh, it should be tough. Yeah, the math checks out in some way, shape, or form. Steiner mathematics is what we do on this program. Speaking of which, ladies and gentlemen, coming up very soon, likely next weekend, the hashtag SAOC 3-round mock for 2025 will be upon us. I already stated the teams last week, but I just want to restate it for the people one more time in case you may have missed last week's episode. You need a bit of a refresher, so I'll be very quick here. Myself, I'm going to be picking the Cleveland Browns, the New England Patriots, the New York Jets, the San Francisco 49ers, the Atlanta Falcons, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Green Bay Packers, the LA Rams, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Rick will be selecting for the Tennessee Titans, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Duval. I feel like Rick should have to say that after at least the first round pick.
Right.
The New Orleans Saints, the Chicago Bears, the Miami Dolphins, the Arizona Cardinals, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Los Angeles Chargers, or San Diego, some people, the Houston Texans, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Washington Commanders. And Justin will pick for the New York Giants, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Carolina Panthers, the Dallas Cowboys, the Indianapolis Colts, the Seattle Seahawks, who have the most picks in this draft with 5, or in the first 3 rounds, I should say, with 5. It'd be really bad if a 7-round mock, the most anyone would have would be 5.
It doesn't really make sense mathematically.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. Look, I'm tired. The Denver Broncos, the Detroit Lions, the Buffalo Bills, and the Kansas City Chiefs. So Justin will have to congruently try to beat the Chiefs with the Bills and the Lions, while also help the Chiefs get back to their throne.
Well, somehow Justin's going to find a way to trade his own pick for his own pick and leave the Bills and Chiefs to swap, and that make it better for the Chiefs, obviously.
And destiny will repeat itself because once again the Bills allow the Kansas City Chiefs to pick just a critical piece of their team.
It's written in the stars.
A million miles away.
Yeah.
Message to the Mano. So just me and Rick went through our picks last week, like just general. How are you feeling about these picks? Which team? I know I listened a lot there. Which team are you maybe the most excited to make some selections for in the mock this time?
It's a good question. I mean, I always have the Chiefs. I feel like I always nail them. We always do pretty well. I didn't get their receiver last year, but I did have them with receivers last year. So that was definitely something that they needed. It's always fun to pick for good teams because you get to be a little spicy. You know what I mean? You get to say, I can ignore a need and strengthen something and make it really exciting. So, for a team like the Bills and the Bengals, like you said, I can go out there and, add a real piece that falls, and all of a sudden everyone has to stop and say, oh, okay.
Yeah, 100%. You also have a team in the Broncos who made a surprise playoff run. The Seattle Seahawks are hoping to get back to being a team of that caliber. 5 picks to play with, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there's talent to add there. And you even have some fringe teams. The Colts who, once again last year, trying to compete for the AFC South. And even the Dallas Cowboys who are hoping to make a step back into the playoffs this season.
Well, the Cowboys I'm a little less interested in because I don't think they have the pieces. But the Seahawks is really interesting with 5 picks and a new quarterback and new wide receiver room there. That's going to be really interesting to play with. And yeah, you're right. Like these fringe teams that were like, they made the playoffs, they just missed out on the playoffs. What can I do to make people say, I might pick them if they do that. I might pick them to make some noise if they do that.
Get the people excited. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how our mock draft plays out. And of course, we're going to finalize all the details here behind the scenes of which draft site we're going to use again this time. I like the one that we used last year. I think we're probably going to end up using it again with the mock draft database. It was very nice. We'll work out the kinks in terms of like how we want to do it in terms of just giving us the 3 rounds and all that stuff. Well, experimentation is happening by our crack tech team here, to say the very least. Maybe crackpot is the better word to describe them. So that being said, guys, it's time for the final segment of the show. You guys know what it's time for whenever he's here. Go on now. It's Podfather, Ranton, Rick's Rostrum Podium. Podfather? Yeah, there was a good bit you could have talked about last week. Some of it you said was out of date, so you didn't. But I think within the past week and change, there's probably been a little bit of a material here for you to rant about. So please take us home.
Oh, is there more than that, or is that it?
Yeah, that was actually it. I didn't have anything else.
I was like waiting for the rest. I thought I had a little issue there on my end. Okay. So actually, I thought about this, and I thought about 3 things just in like the last hour. And so here we go. Number 3 on my list. Someone needs to tell James Corden that he's not funny, because he's just not funny at all. I don't know if you heard about the newest joke that he pulled up. There was some kind of like innuendo joke he made about Judi Dench, who's 90 years old and is a dame. Like, there's a reason why, Corden's been canceled because he's just not a funny individual. When you try and do stuff like Ricky Gervais and you're not Ricky Gervais, it doesn't work out for you. So just stop. Go make Cats 2, since that's the only thing that you were remembered for nowadays, and just leave us alone, please. Number 2 on my list is more kind of a personal bugaboo than anything else. So somehow, some way, out of the blue sky, and I don't know how, and I could have fixed this a while ago, but I haven't because procrastination. Does anybody know how in the hell I got onto the subscribe list for emails from Sargento Cheese? Like, I have my Gmail that has all my my information, my emails, stuff from you guys, stuff from work, and then all of a sudden I get Sargento, $4 off American Slices. Like, when did I sign up for emails from a cheesemaker? And why haven't I unsubscribed from them yet? I don't. And every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, geez, I'm hungry. And it's like 11:30 at night. And I'm like, well, no, I should be asleep. But jeez, it's like, no. So it's been fun, Sargento, but I think we need to see other people. So I'm breaking up with you, and I'm going back to Velveeta or something else instead because no. And number 1, this is kind of more of a disappointment over anything else. Although I think if I say that I'm disappointed in this team for not doing the thing they should have done, it'll somehow invariably make Justin angry, which is fine. But what was that effort today, Washington? On a day when Ovechkin scores the record-breaking goal to pass Wayne Gretzky, that's the only goal y'all score? And you let the hapless New York Islanders trounce you at home with one foot. Like, I love watching records broken in sports. Trust me, it's one of the best things ever. But it makes sense when the team who breaks the record wins the game. It's kind of like those things where it's like in baseball, if I got my 3,000th hit, but my team lost 21-4, like, it's hollow. It doesn't make any sense. It's a hollow victory at that. So, boo on you, Washington. In a down the stretch when you are fingertips away from, and I get it, there's a curse on it, but still, the President's Trophy means something. You're, I think, 10 or 11 points ahead of second place, so you've got the Eastern Conference all sewn up. But God help us, you are the only hope that American hockey has of not letting Canada take back their cup, which will go back with about a 45% tariff on it anyways at this point in time now. So, if this is the game that we point to and say, this is why Winnipeg won the President's Trophy instead of you, then I'm blaming you. And I'm blaming all of Washington, D.C., which I already do anyways for a lot of different things. But, this particular, you can't win right, you can't lose right, you can't play right, you can't govern right. I know part of that's not on Ovechkin, but, he's still an accomplice by association. So, if you're breaking a record, win the game. If you're not, still win the game anyways. It's a fait accompli at this point. The Islanders aren't making the playoffs. Just don't give them hope. Don't give them more hope. There's nothing that I hate more than Islanders fans that have hope. Because as a Ducks fan who's now bitter that my team actually did well enough this year to not get close to a number 1 overall pick, what do I have in this hockey world? What do I have left? I have nothing.
Fair. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, thank you for joining us in this week's edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos. Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Boys, mock draft season is upon us. The NFL draft will soon be upon us too, and we're definitely going to have some fun reviewing the selections made in the real-life draft and comparing and contrasting it to the draft picks that we made in our mock here coming up. The mock draft affair, ladies and gentlemen, always tends to be a pretty long one. So, make sure when we do go live, get ready, get a drink or two, put some cold ice water in your Stanley Cup or your Hydro Peak if you're a real gentleman or lady, like a true human being does. Hydro Peak, best number 1. Shout out. Hopefully a sponsor one day. Get some food ready, put some food in the oven, order out, and get ready to watch the extravaganza that you've been waiting for. The hashtag SAOC 2025 Reround Mock coming to a YouTube near you. literally the only place that we technically go live on. Yeah, we share it on other sites, but live on YouTube to say the least. So thank you so much for joining us for this week's edition of Fun Football Chaos. We will see you beautiful people next time. Thank you. As always. Take care, everyone, and have a good night.